Okay, so we start, we can do 3 mental bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3. And then I'll do one time the verse of salutation. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so good morning, everybody. And so today is June 21st, and we'll be continuing our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Sevens. And let me share the screen. Okay, so is the screen visible?
Terrific.
Okay, then let's increase the type size.
No, it's fine.
Okay. Okay, so now we come to the sutta number 15, which is called, it's the simile of those who are in water. And this, I guess this particular image of crossing a stream or crossing a body of water would be very, very meaningful to people in India in the Buddha's time, because during the monsoon season, you get very, very heavy rains, and then the rivers become swollen, ponds and lakes form that were not there during the dry season. And if people are not careful, people living in little straw huts, they can be swept away into the lake or the river, and they have to cross over. And so this sutta uses the image of crossing a body of water to illustrate 7 kinds of persons. And so we could use this particular template or model to see where we are. And so the Buddha starts off with sort of the brief statement about the 7 kinds of persons in relation to water. So we have one person who goes under once and remains under. This is a person who sadly drowns. Yeah, we read sometimes the monsoon season that this happens in India, now especially in Bangladesh, Southeast Asia, when heavy rainfall, people get swept up in the water and drown. And then there's another person who rises up and then goes under. Then we have a person who rises up and stays there. Then we have the person who, as said, rises up, sees clearly, and looks around. Then the person who rises up and crosses over. The person who rises up and gains a firm foothold. And then the person who has risen up, crossed over, and gone beyond. Yeah, that's the important sort of very pregnant word in the text, going beyond, like reaching the far shore. And that is described as the Brahmin who stands on high ground. Yeah, I cited the Pali here because we have this word parangato. Parang is the far shore, and it becomes, in the Buddhist sort of set scheme of liberation, the far shore is a synonym for nirvana, nibbana. And so the task of the Buddhist practice is to reach the far shore, to go beyond. And this river or lake can represent maybe the cycle of birth and death, the cycle of samsara, repeated birth and death. Okay, so here we have how is a person one who has gone under once and remains under. So this is the person who drowns. And so this is a person, as said, who possesses exclusively black, unwholesome qualities. And so this is the one who goes under once and remains under. Okay, then we have the person who has risen up and then goes under. So here we have a person who rises up thinking good is, he's going to enumerate, I think it's 5 qualities. Faith in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is a sense of hiri, moral shame. First, we'll go through them all and then I'll explain, I'll sort of elaborate on each. Good is moral dread. Good is energy. And good is wisdom in regard to wholesome qualities, in cultivating wholesome qualities. Okay, so first we have here 5 good or wholesome qualities. And what strikes me a little bit puzzling is that earlier in this chapter on the sevens, we had a list of 7 qualities of the trainee. Let's see if we could find them. Or 7 powers, 7 spiritual powers. We have faith, energy, moral shame, moral dread. Then we have mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. But in this sutta, we just have 5 of these. So we have mindfulness and concentration have dropped out. I don't know how to explain that, except my own hypothesis would be that when texts were transmitted orally, it's possible for mistakes to enter. And so it would seem to me to make sense that there should have been all 7 of those spiritual powers mentioned. And perhaps in the process of oral transmission, some transmitter with a bad memory forgot 2 of them, and so they got left out. But in any case, we have 5 of them. And so here we have saddha or faith really in the value of cultivating wholesome qualities. And so we have to have some sense that there's a long-term benefit in cultivating certain wholesome qualities. And the wholesome qualities would be any of the many wholesome qualities enumerated in the Buddhist texts. So maybe since he's going to be speaking about going beyond, we could say the wholesome qualities here might be the 7 factors of enlightenment or the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. And so one has to have some trust or confidence that there's going to be long-term benefit in cultivating the 7 factors of enlightenment, say, cultivating mindfulness, discrimination of qualities, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. So those are 7 factors that lead to going beyond. And so one has to have that trust or confidence that cultivating these qualities is going to bring you across to the far shore, to the stage of nirvanic realization or liberation. Okay, then we have 2 qualities that are often paired. They're sort of almost like 2 sides of the same coin. So one is in Pali, the word is hiri, and the other is otapa. And hiri, we translate moral shame, but it's really hard to get a very satisfactory translation for hiri. Since hiri, the way I would interpret it, is that inner voice that prevents one from committing moral transgressions or engaging in unwholesome activities, from a sense that yielding to those, engaging in those unwholesome activities or following an unwholesome path is going to tarnish one's character. So it's that impulse or wish to uphold and preserve one's inner moral integrity. I think that's a good way to put it. So it's that inner impulse, that inner wish or desire to preserve one's moral integrity that restrains one from committing moral transgressions. So that is hiri. And otapa, its counterpart, is fear of the consequences of committing moral transgressions or of yielding to unwholesome states. And so these could be the immediately visible consequences, these undesirable consequences, blame from others, transgressing, say, the law can lead to legal consequences, but probably the deepest intention here is the karmic consequences of moral transgression. So somebody who is wealthy enough and has a lot of influence can cheat and cheat on the tax returns, do all sorts of unethical things and get away with it. So the law won't touch them, the government won't touch them, and they'll remain respected by others, but you can't escape the results of karma. So once that karma gets the opportunity to ripen, then it brings the undesirable consequences. Yeah, we see that there's a verse in the Dhammapada. How does it go? Not by resorting to the caves, not resorting to a distant island, not running up to the top of the mountain, can you escape from the consequences of your deeds. So, out of concern to avoid the painful consequences of the ripening of unwholesome karma, one observes this principle of upholding ethical conduct. Okay, so this is these two factors, moral shame, moral dread. Then we have energy, and this is virya. Oops. So this is virya, so this is the right effort in abandoning the unwholesome and cultivating the wholesome. And then wisdom. Wisdom is both, we could say, an instrument in cultivating wholesome qualities, in that we use wisdom in order to understand, to be able to distinguish what is unwholesome, what is wholesome. And through wisdom, we keep observing one's state of mind, one's thoughts, one's desires, one's impulses, one's feelings, one's intentions, in order to distinguish what is unwholesome, what is wholesome, what is beneficial, what is likely to be harmful in the long term. So we have wisdom, we could say, as an instrument or tool in cultivation. And wisdom is also, we could say, it's the peak or culmination of wholesome qualities. And so there's a sutta, I think it's in the Samyutta Nikaya, on the five faculties, where the Buddha speaks about the five spiritual faculties. Here we have a little bit different from these. There we have faith, energy, mindfulness, samadhi, and wisdom. And the Buddha says of those five spiritual faculties, the peak, the culmination, the high point is wisdom. So the other four spiritual faculties are the sort of supports for wisdom, and they culminate in wisdom, because wisdom is the factor that brings liberation. And in the next group of suttas, we're going to see what is involved in cultivating wisdom, in arriving at the right liberating wisdom. Okay, so here we have the person who rises up and then goes under. And so the person rises up at it with the conviction that it's good to cultivate these five beneficial qualities. However, he says, his faith doesn't become stable or grow, but declines. And then the sense of moral shame, moral dread, energy, wisdom, they don't become stable and grow, but they diminish or decline. And that's the kind of person who is risen up and then goes under. And I have to say, like in my monastic life, I've come across quite a lot of people during the time that I was living in Sri Lanka. These are especially Westerners who come over. They ordain as monks with great enthusiasm. The first few months, a few years, they're very, very diligent and energetic, trying to meditate maybe 25 hours a day, following the practice, just one meal a day and diminishing the food. I've even seen a monk who came to see me. His body was almost like a skeleton. I think he was French or Dutch. I don't remember. And then because they maybe tried to cultivate too diligently with too much enthusiasm at the outset, after some time, sort of the human mind, the tendencies of the human mind catch up with them. And before long, they're spending more time going to Colombo, hanging out at temples in Colombo rather than in the forest monastery. And, and then they ask one of the lay attendants to go out to a shop and buy a set of trousers and a shirt and a plane ticket back to Europe or Australia, and then they're gone. Of course, it might be that they continue. In fact, a number of them continue to live quite good, devoted lives as Buddhist practitioners in the lay life, but it shows how one can fall away from one's enthusiasm because one doesn't go about it in a wise, temperate, moderate way. Okay, so that is the person who rises up but doesn't become stabilized and then diminishes. Okay, then we have the person who has risen up and stays put. Okay, so this is the person who, again, the same way, rises up with the same kinds of convictions, but then his sense of moral shame, his faith, again, neither diminishes nor grows. So it just stays put. The sense of moral shame, moral dread, energy, wisdom, neither diminishes nor grows. It just stays put. So I think that's not a bad thing. You know, if one could stabilize those five qualities, at least they will sustain one in one's spiritual practice. In fact, it seems to me, though, that there's a type of person that is omitted here, and I would add that person in between 3 and 4. So maybe this, we could say number 3 is a person maybe who stagnates in their spiritual life. Like they don't give up their conviction in wholesome qualities, like number 2, and just immerse themselves in a life of worldly indulgence, self-indulgence, but they don't continue to make progress, but they just reach a certain level of stability, and then they stagnate at that level. Okay, then let's say the person number 4, it seems a little bit, the expressions are a little bit unusual. So we have one who has risen up, sees clearly, and looks around. And so again, this is the person who rises up thinking good is faith and wholesome qualities and so forth. And then it says, with the utter destruction of 3 fetters, these are the three lowest fetters, this person is a stream enterer. So that is the level that they've reached, the level of the sotapanna. And it just struck me that there's interesting contrast here. So on the one hand, in the metaphor or the simile that's being used, we have the person who is in a stream trying to get out of the stream. But from the other angle, from the standpoint, the practical angle, we have the people who are like ordinary people who are striving to get into the stream. But that is the stream that one is trying to cross over to escape from. That is the stream of samsara, the cycle of birth and death. But the stream that one is trying to enter is the stream of the liberating, the transcendent Noble Eightfold Path. And so here we have the person, the level is that of the stream enterer, and then their qualities, what makes them a stream enterer, first sort of the ticket that one has to purchase to become the stream enterer is to destroy the 3 lower fetters. What are those 3 lower fetters? I'm getting old and my memory is not so good anymore. Anybody remember them?
Self-view.
Okay, so the view of self, yeah, okay.
View of self.
Okay,
and clinging to beliefs and rituals.
Clinging to what?
Rituals.
Rites and rituals, Bhante.
Rites and rituals.
Okay, so we got 2. And the second one?
Doubt.
Doubt.
Doubt and practice.
Okay, I've heard that. Okay.
Sorry, Bhante. Doubt about Dhamma.
Yeah. Okay, so we have all 3. So the first is called, in Pali, is called Sakaya Ditti, which we could explain as the view of a truly existent self, a self existing in some way in relation to and dependence on the 5 aggregates. So that is the first fetter. And this is a conceptual or kind of theoretical view of self that's been eliminated. And the second is the doubt, and this is specifically doubt about the Buddha as being completely enlightened, doubt about the Dhamma as being the truth, about the nature of things, and doubt about the training or the path of practice. And then the third is sometimes translated clinging to rites and rituals. But I think the original tension, as I think I've explained several times, sila bhatta paramasa. So it's the way it's explained in the Abhidhamma, it's clinging to the different types of observances that were common during the Buddha's time, or even in India today, some of these ascetic practices, including the Brahminic rituals, in the belief that performing these rituals, engaging in these practices, can bring purification and liberation For example, the common belief still observed today that you have to go to the Ganges River to bathe, especially on certain auspicious days. Is it Kumbh Mela? Is that what it's called? When actually millions of people converge at a certain conjunction of two rivers. It's the Ganges River and the Yamuna. And the
Kumbh Mela is the main landmark of the word merge and dips in the water. And I think it depends on different types.
Yeah, I'm not.
Some happens every.
Yeah. It happens at intervals. I think it happened this past year. I think I was in India at that time.
Yes, Bhante, I was right in the midst of it. Me too. I was in India at that time.
Did you go?
Gosh, there were millions of people. Yeah, we went to the Ganges. We took the boat ride, and there were so many people, busloads. The traffic was horrible, but yeah, I got stuck in it.
Yeah, it's a place to avoid at that time. Anyway, so that is a belief. Oh, that's one of the beliefs, sort of bathing in the sacred rivers that will purify one. The ascetic practices observed by the Shrabanas, the ascetics of the Buddha's time, sleeping on beds of thorns, exposing one's body to the heat of the sun in the middle of the day. They have the practice. You light 4 fires in each of the 4 primary directions, and then you sit in the middle of the 4 fires at noon when the sun is bearing down with full force. That is supposed to be beneficial. And some of the other, you find descriptions of them in the suttas. Fasting for long periods. Anyway, so I don't want to get into all of those details. So those are the 3 fetters that are eliminated, and then the person becomes a stream enterer, and they're no longer subject to rebirth in the lower world, the apaya, the plane of misery, that is in the hell realms, the animal realm, or the realm of pretas, the hungry ghosts. They're fixed in destiny, which means that they take rebirth in either the human realm or in one of the heavenly realms, but not in any lower realm. And they're heading for enlightenment. They're heading for full liberation in a maximum of 7 more lives. And what is distinctive about the attainment of the path of stream entry, I think why it's called seeing clearly, is that one sees directly into the 4 noble truths for the first time, especially seeing directly the 3rd noble truth, Nibbana, as the cessation of suffering. And then when you see Nibbana clearly, then you look around, coming back to the 5 aggregates, and see these 5 aggregates are dukkha, connected with suffering. Okay, so that is how that's the 4th type of person. And I said that there should be a person in between the 3rd and 4th. So I would say this is a person who rises up and has faith or sees good as faith and so on. And he doesn't stay put, but he continues to make progress. He hasn't yet reached stream entry, but he's getting closer and closer, sort of swimming across the stream, until at a certain point, when all of those faculties come to sufficient degree of strength, then they will reach stream entry. So I like to think that we are, unless you're already a stream enterer, but I like to think that we who are Buddhist practitioners would fall into that category. We'll call it category 3/4, in between 3 and 4. Okay, so now we have a person In the next level, this is the one who is risen up and is crossing over. I guess this is person who's getting closer and closer to the far shore. And so this is a person, everything, all the descriptions are the same, except that now we have the person destroys the three lower fetters, but further diminishes or weakens the three unwholesome roots of greed, hatred, and delusion. And so this person becomes the once returner who comes back to this world, might come back to this world only one more time, and then reach the end of dukkha, reach liberation. But it said in the commentaries, actually in the Abhidhamma, it said that this person might come back to the human world for one more rebirth, might take rebirth one more time in one of the heavenly worlds, or might, from the human realm, take rebirth in one of the heavenly realms, then pass away from the heavenly realm and come into the human realm, and then reach the end. So it's not the case that the person has only one more rebirth. They could have two more rebirths. But what is sort of the special characteristic of this person is the diminishing or the weakening of greed, hatred, and delusion, so that the 5 rebirths that remain for the stream enterer are now removed. So they have at most one more rebirth, perhaps 2. Okay, so now number 6, we have the person who has risen up and attained a firm foothold. So maybe this is, if we want to use the image, of course, the person is not yet on the far shore. So maybe there are some, as the person is getting close to the shore, there's like the body of water, sort of the sand underwater. Let's say that the height of the water is not very high, so the person can now stand up. They're no longer swimming across, but they've gotten a firm foothold into the, what do you call this? It's a part of the lake or river, which is still underwater, but it's getting close to the shore.
Is it the shallows, Bhante?
You could call it the shallows. So they've gotten a firm foothold in the shallows. Maybe there's some rocks underneath the water, and so they're standing on the rocks. And so this is a person who has these conviction about the good to cultivate these wholesome qualities. And now, with the utter destruction of the 5 lower fetters, he is of spontaneous birth. We'll explain that. And due to attain final nibbana there without returning from that world. So that's the person who is risen up. Yeah, it's like they're standing up. They're not swimming anymore. And they have a firm foothold in the shallows, so they could walk the rest of the way to get onto the shore. So this is the person who becomes the non-returner. So they've destroyed the 5 lower fetters. So we already know what the 3 first lower fetters are. And then the 4th and 5th, the 4th one is sensual craving, sensual lust, and ill will or aversion. And so those are the 2 fetters that keep beings tied to our sense sphere or desire realm of existence. And so when those fetters are destroyed, then the person is no longer bound to come back to the sense sphere. And the sense sphere includes the human realm and the 6 lower heavenly realms. And above those 6 heavenly realms, the desire, the sensual heavenly realms is the form realm, or the realm of subtle matter. And the beings there still have material bodies, but they have very, very subtle sense organs, very subtle material form, and there's no longer any sensual desire in that realm. And there are many different levels of that realm. And within the form realm, there's a special section that is reserved for non-returners. Those are called the pure abodes. So there are 5 of them, depending, and then rebirth into those 5 depends on the strength of one's spiritual faculties. And so generally, I think non-returners, yeah, I'm not sure about this actually, but certainly non-returners are born in the form realm. I'm not certain that they're necessarily born in the pure abodes, because the pure abodes pertain to the 4th jhana. And so it might be only that non-returners who attain the 4 jhanas are reborn in the pure abodes. But what is definitely certain is that non-returners are reborn spontaneously. They don't depend on biological parents, but they just arise spontaneously in the form realm with subtle material bodies and in the form realm, they're bound to attain final liberation, final nibbana in the form realm without returning from that world back into the desire realm. Okay, so that is the person who's risen up and gained a firm foothold. So the person is standing in the shallows, maybe walking towards the shore. And then we have the person, the 7th person. This is the one who has risen up. They've stood up. They're not swimming anymore. And this is the one who is crossed over, gone beyond, and then gone beyond. Parangato could also mean gone to the far shore. And then it's described as a Brahmin who stands on high ground. And of course, the Buddha is sort of using the word Brahmin he reconceptualizes the idea of the Brahmin as not the person born into a particular caste in the Indian caste system, but the Brahmin in the sense of the one who's the true holy person, the one who has eliminated all of the mental defilements. In other words, it's the Arahat. And so the Buddha now describes the person who is the Brahmin who stands on high ground, using the standard formula for the attainment of arhatship. So with the destruction of the asavas, translated here as the taints, he has realized for himself, I should say, or she has realized for herself with direct knowledge in this very life, right, in this existence itself, the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, and having entered upon it, he or she dwells in it. And so we have sort of the distinctive sort of marks of arhatship here is the taintless liberation of mind, which the commentaries say is the samadhi, the concentration inherent in the fruit of arhatship, and liberation by wisdom. That is, through wisdom, the disciple has destroyed the asavas and gained that liberation. And so the suttas, the Nikayas, they mention many kinds of liberation of mind, at least several kinds of liberation of mind. For example, we have the metta ceta vimutti, is the liberation of mind through loving kindness. So that is not permanent liberation of mind, but that is a kind of samadhi, which is attained by using metta as the meditation subject. So one cultivates the metta strongly over and over until it becomes so powerful that all of the defilements subside and the mind can enter into a blissful samadhi with the mind suffused with loving kindness, and similar with karuna, with compassion, with altruistic joy, with equanimity. Then there is the, let us say, I think it's called the akinchana Cheto Vimutti, the liberation of mind through nothingness. And so that is somebody who develops the formless or non-material meditative attainments and then enters upon the Akinchana is it's the third formless non-material meditative absorption. So that's called the nothingness liberation of mind. But again, it's a temporary liberation of mind. And there are a number of other kinds of temporary liberation of mind mentioned in the text. But this, what is described here, is the taintless liberation of mind. This is the final or ultimate liberation of mind. And this liberation of mind comes about through wisdom, and it's coupled with wisdom. So here we have samadhi, representing the liberation of mind, and panya, liberation by wisdom, joined together. And so this disciple who has destroyed the taints is able to enter and dwell in that taintless liberation of mind, which has come about through the instrumentality of wisdom. Okay, so these, the Buddha then concludes and says, these are the 7 kinds of persons found in the world, similar to those in water. Okay, so maybe we could see if people have some questions. Let me just go to the participant list. Oh, is it? Okay, I see. Anyway, I see. I can't find the participant list, but I see keep. Okay, there we are. Okay. Okay, so I see just Gita has the hand raised, and you can unmute the mic.
Yes, Bhante. Thank you, first of all, for all the teachings. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bhante, my question is, in the pure abodes, is that just below the Brahma realms, but above the Deva realms? It's a subtle material body with no, it's gender neutral,
Yeah.
right? Is that correct? Like, is it just below the Brahma realm, or is it is it considered a Brahma realm
So
at that point?
the pure abodes would be considered, you could call them part of the Brahma world.
Okay.
So we have maybe I could get my cosmological chart open. Let me just find.
Yes, it's in that book, Bhante,
Okay,
your chart. Yeah.
it's in here.
Yeah.
Okay, is this visible?
Yes, Bhante, can you increase the font size? Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Okay, so here we have it's called the blissful sense sphere heavens. You see the 6th sense sphere heaven.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so above that, we come to here it's called the fine material plane, or
Right.
the form plane. And then we have 4 levels corresponding to the 4 jhanas, each
Right.
3 divisions, or some have 3 divisions. And so usually what we call the Brahma world is the lowest one, the first jhana plane. So but also sometimes the commentaries will refer to the entire fine material plane as the Brahma world. So here we have first jhana
Right.
plane, second jhana plane. We'll call this the third jhana plane, and then the fourth jhana plane. And within the fourth jhana plane, we have the pure abodes, the 5 pure abodes.
Mhm.
Yeah, so you can see that it's in the fine material plane.
Brahma realm. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so next we have Sarah Quinn.
Hello, Bhante. I think maybe that might have just been answered. I was thinking, was the nothingness the same as meditating on emptiness? Well, they're the same, but then I just saw that it might be different grades within that 4th jhana. I think, and why would people want to develop nothingness? What would be the benefit?
Yeah, I think nothingness, we have trouble translating this term. It doesn't mean that there's absolutely nothing there. It's just that it's a very, very subtle kind of meditative absorption in which I think the idea nati kinchi is that there's no obstruction in that meditative state. Yeah, but anyway, it's considered a very, very peaceful, very sublime state of absorption in which the equanimity becomes very prominent.
I do a lot of Qigong, and the Qigong teachers, I think they teach from this a lot about this spaciousness and going beyond. So I think a lot of them are focusing maybe on that level. And so, okay. And is it something that people sometimes just fall into in their practice, or that they deliberately try to create?
Generally, one has to make the deliberate effort to attain it. One has to first master the 4 jhanas, and then one goes beyond the 4 jhanas to the base, what's called the base of infinite space, then goes beyond that to the base of nothingness. Then above that is the base of infinite space, base of infinite consciousness. Then above that is the base of nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a very, very tranquil absorption. And it's not an actual state of real liberation, just a temporary liberation of mind.
And if you found yourself in that state, what would you then do? Would you need to just keep going further?
You mean to gain true liberation?
Yeah, if people experience that state of the 4th jhana, would you need to make an effort then to go beyond that?
Yeah, to go into the base of infinite space, there's particular technique for doing it. And that is described in the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you very
much. Go into that now. I want to sort of stay to questions that are more directly tied to the sutta.
Thank you.
Okay, so next will be Fernanda.
Thank you, Bhante. Which is the difference between Virya and Apamadena Sampadeta?
Okay, between Virya and Appamada.
Apamadena Sampadeta?
Yeah, well,
Yes?
Appamadena Sampadeta is a statement that is usually translated strive on with diligence. And so the term there is Appamada, which is what's translated as diligence. And so Virya and Appamada are very closely connected. But in my understanding, Appamada is a combination of factors. Maybe I would actually say that it's a combination, excuse me. I say that appamada is a combination of the four of these five factors mentioned in our sutta. So it involves, I would say, hmm, but now I'm having trouble finding this. Yeah, so I would say that appamada involves these four qualities, that involves the sense of moral shame, sense of moral dread, energy, and mindfulness, and to some degree, wisdom, but especially energy and mindfulness work together in appamada. So appamada is not so much like a more specific and technical quality, but we could say a combination of qualities.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we take Douglas. And so unmute.
Thank you, Bhante. It strikes me that there's an assumption underlying these seven types of people, that he's laying out, in a sense, a developmental progression. Similar, say, to the Lam Rim approach in Tibetan Buddhism, or the 10 ox herding pictures in Zen. And to what extent do you think that this is the progression most practitioners go through in your experience?
Okay, I can't speak from personal experience of going through the higher stages of progression, but sort of this is the, say, the map of stages that people will go through, but it's a question whether you have to go through each one in turn, or whether it's possible to go from, this will be the stage of maybe the virtuous, ordinary person, to go to one of the higher stages without passing through the lower stages. Yeah, that I don't know. Like there are some suttas which speak about somebody coming to the Buddha, they haven't learned the Dhamma before, they listen to a discourse, and then it said like right on the spot, they attain the stage of non-returner, or sometimes even the stage of arhatship. So if you just take the sutta, literally, it seems that they jump from the stage of good, ordinary person to the stage of arhatship without going through the sequence. But the way it's explained in the commentaries is that they very quickly go through the lower stages. It's like a sort of like going through them, boom, boom, boom. So within like about 1 minute, they might go first stream entry, then coming out from that, once returning, coming out from that, non-returning, then coming to arhatship. But I can't speak about that from personal experience.
Thank you.
Okay, let us, wow, it's 11:10. Any other questions? Okay, Jia Huang. Well, actually, Jia, I think Huang is the last name. So Jia?
Hi, thank you, Bhante, for teaching. I'm just curious that for this group of people you mentioned, right here, I'm just wondering, is that we're talking about one lifetime or multiple lifetimes? Uh,
You mean with these four stages of attainment?
no, like the group of people who rise up but sinking back down. Um, I'm just wondering, does that span several lifetime or just one lifetime? Like, will become a monk and then probably disrobe this is one lifetime. But if you're saying that this life you have been cultivating very well, and next life you might not doing so well, does that consider to be inclusive in this type of category?
Yeah, I haven't thought about that question, but I think it can extend over several lifetimes. Like somebody might be, let's see, so they might, this is just speculative, but we could have, okay, somebody who has risen up. So maybe they have these good qualities in this life, and then they pass on to a next life. I'm just trying to figure out how this would work. So they would still have the potential for these good qualities. And then maybe the good qualities will manifest within the next life and then diminish in the next life. Yeah, I'm just not sure how this works.
I just tried to fit myself in the category. I couldn't find my category.
I think what's just important is to know what the desirable qualities are and to go on trying to cultivate them.
But I would think that category of rising up and then stay put um, will be probably in the average category before we go to the set, the stream entry.
Yeah, that's the way the sutta puts it. But it seems to me that if you say stays put with the image of crossing a body of water, it seems to suggest somebody who remains in the same place is not making further progress to get across the stream or across, let's say, across the river. So it seems to me that there should be another category, which is a person who has risen up, not yet seen clearly, not yet become a stream enterer, but is making progress getting across the stream until at a certain point, then they will see clearly. They rise up and then they see clearly. Then they remove the three lower fetters and become a stream enterer.
But is that stream enterer being a good mark to kind of record the wisdom, like, you have increased wisdom, you consider as a stream enterer, but prior to that, probably you consider it's not really wisdom, it's the wisdom pretty much considered as a stays put instead of increase. Does that make sense?
No, I don't know, it gets a little speculative.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. So I see two more questions. So we have Arvind, then you lower the hand.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Bhante. Thank you for this lesson and thank you for all that you do. I have a question with regards to the stages of progression.
Yeah.
Are all the stages of progression available towards a lay person, or would someone actually have to take up a robe in order to completely progress to the highest stage?
Okay, well, what is said is that what we say in the suttas is that there are lay people, disciples of the Buddha, who reach the three lower stages here and continue to live as lay people. Excuse me, even at the stage of non-returner. So the Buddha speaks about having lay disciples who have reached the stage of non-returning. And he says that they're lay disciples clothed in white, that they wear white clothes. It means that they're not monastics. You find them mentioned, let's see, just one sutta offhand will be Majjhima Nikaya, sutta number 73. Possibly also sutta number 68 or 60, possibly number 68. There are some other suttas, but these come immediately to mind. Okay, but as for the stage of arhatship, what is said is that it's possible for a layperson to attain arahatship, but once they attain arahatship, they will either they attain arahatship right very close to the point of death, that very soon after attaining it, they pass away, or alternatively, they can attain arahatship, but they will have to ordain, I think it's said within 7 days, or maybe some texts say within 24 hours. Yeah, so if a layperson attains arhatship, you have to quickly head to the nearest temple or monastery. Yeah, there was an incident that took place at a well-known monastery in Sri Lanka actually 19, not some years ago, quite a long time ago, 1982. There were two youngsters who were at this monastery. They were like the kapiyas, the attendants. They would help the monks, clean up and bring them their food and their drink and so on. And then they saw that the monks were doing meditation, so they asked the meditation teacher, "Can we practice too?" I said, "Sure." And then they taught them meditation subject. And then they started to report their experiences. And wow, very quickly, like a couple of days later, reporting first jhana. Wow, these kids are just really fantastic. Then a few days later, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. Wow, that can we practice insight meditation? So then the teacher taught them insight. They start going through this reporting stage, going through the stages of insight. Then they report their experiences, which the teacher confirms, they've reached stream entry, wonderful. Then a few days later, maybe non-returning, magnificent, this is historical. Then they report, the next report, arhatship, but they're still not yet ordained. And then they had them ordained because they didn't want the boys to die. But then one of now the young monks had some stomach complaint, and they brought him to the hospital, and the doctor said, "We're going to have to do surgery." And then the young monk, now the teenage monk, burst out crying. And then they realized he can't be an arhat if he's afraid of surgery. And so anyway, that sort of false evaluation was broken. But those young monks, they continued as monks, and they continued to do quite well as monks. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. That leaves some hope for us. Thank you.
So let us take one more question. This is it Yusef or just Yus?
Or just use Bhante.
Okay.
Yes, Bhante. My question is about when the simile says stream enterer is one who sees clearly. What does it mean by seeing nibbana clearly? Is it like an intellectual understanding of nibbana, or is it an actual experience of nibbana?
No, it's an actual experience of nibbana.
Okay.
Yeah. So what happens, and this is sort of explained within the Abhidhamma system, that the meditator goes through the stages of insight, the higher and higher stages of insight. And in the stages of insight, the mind is taking as its object the 5 aggregates and observing their impermanence, suffering, non-self nature. But then when they reach the peak of insight, then the mind sort of spontaneously drops the five aggregates as object, and just momentarily it sort of lands upon nibbana as the object. Nibbana sort of appears to the mind, And with that manifestation of Nibbana, simultaneously there comes the removal of the 3 lower fetters. Yeah, and that is called the path experience of stream entry.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, I think we'll have to close for the day. Oh, I should mention, next week I won't be able to give the class because I have to go for some function. And the week after that, we have the summer, excuse me, the summer Dharma camp here at Zhuangyan Monastery. So I won't be available for the class. That's, I think it's July 6th. So the next class will be, I think it's July 13th, the second Saturday in July. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but a friend of mine who's now a novice monk, he will be getting his Upasampada, his full ordination next week. And so he invited me to come for his ordination in New Jersey. Okay, so let us end with the sharing of the merits. And so we'll share the merits of our Dhamma discussion. We share them with the devas, the nagas or dragon spirits, and with all sentient beings. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyanta manumodipa chirang kantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyanta manumodipa chirang kantu desanang. Akasata chabumata Deva naga mahidika punyanta manumodipa chirang kantu mang parang dukkha pata chani dukkha baya pata chani baya soka pata chani soka hantu sabe pipanino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. Okay, and then we'll do 3 bows to the Buddha. So we could stand up. Okay, so thank you for coming to the class today.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
And a bow to Bhante Bodhi. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
See you in 2 weeks, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
You'll still have the Wednesday class?
Yeah,
Thank you,
Wednesday.
Bhante.
Wednesday's okay. All right, Bhante. All right. Have a good lunch. Take care. Be
Okay.
safe. Be well.
Bye.
Okay.
Everyone, Sanai.
Thank you,
Budaya.
Bhante.
Take care,
Bhante.
happily, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bhante.
Bye, Carolyn.
Thank you,
Yes.
Bhante.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bye.